Works of fiction such as video games, movies, TV shows, books, all more often than not contain a story. And all these stories more often than not contain characters. Characters we all grow up with, become attached to, and love forever. Now of course there are passing favorite characters. Characters that come and go in your heart as you continue to watch what you're watching or play what you're playing. But today I'm going to be counting those 10 characters that never passed through. They came and stayed. These fictional characters come from anywhere. TV shows, movies, video games, you name it. And if there's multiple coming from the same franchise, I'll just include them in the same spot so they won't take up too many places on the list. With all that said, it's time to count down my top 10 favorite fictional characters.
We're finally painting the shed.
When it comes to Team Fortress 2, there's a cast of 9 colorful characters to choose from, and in terms of gameplay, I always lean more towards the engineer or the spy. But there's one character whose personality shines brighter than anyone else, in the shorts, in the comics, and in the games, even though I don't main him. It's the Scout. He's probably the loudest, cockiest, and most self-absorbed member in this team of mercs. But he has a gun, so you have to listen to him. Now, the Heavy is arguably the face of Team Fortress 2, but you're more likely to hear people say bonk or quote Scout's famous grass grows line. I mean, the Scout as a character alone is what got me into Team Fortress 2 in the first place, and he kept me staying. It must say a lot when this game is over a decade old and still kicking with Scout as the shining star that steals the show every time. The Scout steps up to bat at number 10.
No, I am great with girls. We both got buckets of chicken. You want to do it?
Okay.
We're finally painting the shed.
Unfortunately, this is one of the characters many people don't get unless they've played the game she's from. They tend to only look skin deep and see her as blatant sex appeal that spurts nothing but innuendos. And, yeah. But she's other things too. She has some of the coolest weapons, some of the coolest fighting styles, and some of the coolest summons I have ever seen in video games. She's super confident, funny, managed to make an amnesia story interesting, and she's always fair and balanced. There's a saying, a round character is changed by the world, but a flat character changes the world. So despite Bayonetta's flat personality, the way she bounces off and interacts with other characters in her world makes her stand out a ton. She's a 10 out of 10 girl from a 10 out of 10 game. Bayonetta is summoned to the number 9 spot.
What kind of adult picks on little children?
I'm not a child.
We're finally painting the shed.
Now, admittedly, there's not very much anime out there that can grab and hang on to my interest. There's plenty of reasons for that, too many to go into for this video. But all that's relevant right now is that my favorite of the few anime I have seen and paid attention to is Hajime no Ippo, my favorite character from it being the one and only Taka Mura. He is pretty much the Scout if he could actually walk the walk too, instead of just talking the talk. He's a womanizer, he's cocky, he's loud and arrogant, but he does prove himself time and time again. Whenever he says he's going to do something, he does it. It's very hard to make a character like this and have the audience want to see him succeed, but Taka Mura manages to pull it off. He's like a superhero. The way he taunts and teases his gym mates is always comedic, his fight scenes are always explosive and exciting to watch, and I don't think I would like the anime nearly as much without him. Taka Mura knocks out the number 8 spot.
We're finally painting the shed.
Adventure Time, one of the most influential cartoons ever made. Cartoons have had story arcs before, but Adventure Time popularized it with its unique world, detailed lore, and deep characters, including, but not limited to, Ice King and Marceline. Throughout the entire long-running series, I'd say these two have gone through the most development. Ice King went from an insane sociopathic princess kidnapper to just a sad old man that wants to be happy and get better in the head. And Marceline went from an antisocial deviant trickster to someone who's more open about herself, someone who's more confident about who she is and will let more people into her life. And funnily enough, these two characters actually share a backstory together. In case you haven't seen Adventure Time, I won't spoil anything, but it's one of the most fascinating bits of lore in the entire series. If you check out the show yourself, I'm sure they'll be your favorites too. Ice King and Marceline fly to the number 7 spot.
You will no longer terrify a 47-year-old man and a 7-year-old girl!
We're finally painting the shed.
In a show full of overly exaggerated teenage stereotypes, the most normal character, Noah, is the one that stands out to me the most. He's just very easy to relate to as he's an all-around super average guy. He's not super handsome like Alejandro, but he's not an uggo either. He's not super smart like Harold, but he's not an idiot. He's not super mean or evil like Duncan and Heather, but he's not a nice goody two-shoes either. He's just in the middle everywhere. And I think that's just what makes him a fun character. His relatable sarcasm, his responses to Owen's stupidity, and his witty comebacks to snarky remarks made by other contestants. He's also one of the more well-developed characters in the series. He went from just an arrogant brainiac to someone who learned that brains isn't all you need to win this competition and learned to appreciate the quirks and weirdness of others. Whether it be his friendship with Owen or his relationship with Emma, Noah just has a lot going for him. So Noah drops in at the number 6 spot.
If Nutsy can do it, we can do it. Come on!
We're finally painting the shed.
And how could I not include characters from my favorite cartoon ever? Finding a character I hate in this show is like finding a needle in a haystack, CJ being that needle. But the two characters I'm honoring on this spot of the list is our main duo, Mordecai and Rigby. This is the very first show I watched from the very start all the way to the very end, and Mordecai and Rigby were on the front of it all, teaching me various life lessons and making me laugh every step of the way. They get into wacky situations all the time, but also have some deep character arcs. Mordecai with his girl problems and trying to find his place in the world and get out of this stupid park, and Rigby trying to go back to high school and make something of himself. Both are so much more than just lazy slackers. They have so many sets of skills and smarts to offer, and they're honestly one of the strongest friendships I've ever seen in a cartoon. Mordecai and Rigby fist bump in the number 5 spot.
I want everyone to line up, and when the balls drop...
We're finally painting the shed.
And now comes the only live-action character on this list. I would have included a character from The Walking Dead, but my favorite in that show keeps rotating as I continue to watch it. When it comes to that 70s show though, Steve and Hyde will always be first place in my mind. It is extremely hard to find a developed sitcom character. Look at Drake and Josh. Drake is the ladies' man and Josh is the dorky straight man. Look at Full House. Danny Tanner is overprotective neat freak. Uncle Jesse is cool uncle. And when it comes to Steve and Hyde, while at first glance it may seem like he's nothing more than a conspiracy theorist degenerate, there's actually a lot of layers to him. At the beginning of the series, he never knew his real father and his stepfather walked out on him. And then later on, his mother walked out on him. And with most of his other relatives either dead or in prison, Steven had no choice but to stay with the Formans. Instead of deciding to stay as the delinquent though, Steven gets a job to show his gratitude towards their generosity. He pays rent, helps out around the house, and he's always there for his friends when they need him. And he loves them even though he never wants to admit it. He's just one of the most real characters I've ever seen in a sitcom, and he'll always be my favorite. Stephen Hyde steals the number 4 spot.
I'm not shallow anymore.
Don't do that when I'm eating.
We're finally painting the shed.
For those who don't know, my profile picture isn't just a character I came up with. It's what I actually look like. White hair, glasses, blue eyes, I'm albino. And with albinism comes some vision problems. And while there's no albino fictional characters that I can think of and relate to, Toph is still close enough, being blind and all that. I mean, I'm not totally blind, but I do stumble over myself a lot, I bump into things occasionally, and I do stress out over my physical appearance because there are some things I just can't see. But seeing as how it doesn't bother Toph and she's just so strong and keeps pushing on, it's inspiring. Not to mention she's just a funny little brat and has the coolest powers in the show. I mean, if I were to choose a power, I'd go with earthbending. Overall, she's just a fantastic character and I can't get over how she keeps holding her head up high despite her disability. Toph sets her sights on the number 3 spot.
It's
so dark down here. I can't see a thing.
Oh no, what a nightmare.
Sorry.
We're finally painting the shed.
If you grew up in the 80s, you were likely a Mario kid. If you grew up in the early 90s, you were likely a Sonic kid. But I grew up in the late 90s, so I'm a Crash Bandicoot kid. Not just Crash though, no. I'm also including his super comedic nemesis, Dr. Neo Periwinkle Cortex. Yes, that is in fact his middle name. This duo of hero and villain is like peanut butter and jelly. You just can't have one without the other. While having a very Mega Man and Dr. Wily relationship at first, Crash Twinsanity developed the duo even further. The two gained a little respect for each other, had great chemistry, and we even got some incredible backstory for Cortex and world building in the Crash Bandicoot universe. Not to mention, when Cortex actually gets overshadowed by another villain in his series, he does something about it. Unlike some egg-shaped scientist we know. Crash's Looney Tunes-esque personality and Cortex's insanity always come to mind first when I think of characters I grew up with. Crash Bandicoot and Dr. Neo Cortex take over the number 2 spot.
We're finally painting the shed.
No build up this time, I'm getting straight into it. It's Jin Kazama from the Tekken series. And the reasoning why is actually pretty disappointing compared to other characters on this list. Fighting games are my favorite game genre, and he just happens to be my favorite character from my favorite fighting game. I don't think there's really anything special about him other than he's just cool. I mean, despite being an edgy boy that actually does try to solve his own problems, he still is a pretty boring and generic character. But I mean, hey, it can happen. People have Dante from Devil May Cry as their favorite fictional character despite him being more boring and overrated. But when it comes to Jin though, I just really can't think of anything other than the fact that he's cool. I like his lightning aura, I like all his powers, I like his story, I like his focused, precise, and punishing gameplay in his own games. I don't have any emotional connection to him, but I just like him. So I'm sorry this list ends on a rather underwhelming note, but Jin Kazama has taken the number 1 spot. And this was my top 10 favorite fictional characters. LeopoldTheBrave out.